Hey, welcome to our Mr. Grow Trip. This is a podcast where I, Kim, your friendly neighborhood spiritual wellness coach and Jungian mystic, talk about things that pertain to trying to help women find their true authentic self, their true voice, and the path that would make them happy. And I do that by using tarot, astrology, and mindfulness to help guide them, help guide women find this path because these tools are so much more. Anyways, today we're going to start by talking about something called conditioning. And when you hear that term, a lot of people think big and abstract ideas, but the truth is, it happens in small, everyday ways, and we all have it, right? So if you've ever thought, like, somebody asks you to do something, right? And you go, you say yes, and then you walk away, and about 2, 3 minutes later, you're like, why did I agree to that, right? Or why do I keep choosing this same thing even though I know better? The truth is, you're not alone. We almost everyone has those thoughts. I think. Like I'm sure there's people out there that think they don't, but there's something in their life that's conditioned, right? My cat. Um, that's what we're talking about today, right? Conditioning. And how it quietly shapes your daily choices. I'm sorry if you hear noise. That's my cat. She's being crazy. Um, anyways, let's keep going. Oh, let me get it. All right. So the first thing we have to think about is what it actually feels like, conditioning. You know, a lot of people, as I said in the beginning, think it's something very obvious, super extreme. But the truth is, conditioning can be very, very quiet. It's stuff that you maybe don't choose consciously. Uh, the rules, basically, conditioning is the rules that you've learned without somebody sitting you down and saying, this is what you should do, right? Things like don't cause problems, be realistic, be grateful, don't want too much. All of these things are things that you may have learned in life, but it wasn't like your parents or somebody sat down and said, hey, you know that thing that you want? That's too much. You shouldn't want it. They may have. Some people's parents, right? The tricky part of this all is that in the moment when we're making those decisions, it doesn't feel bad, right? It actually kind of feels normal, to be truthful. So we don't really question it. We just kind of move through our days and we make these decisions and they feel almost automatic, like they're coming from us, but the truth is they're not quite coming from us, some of them. Some of them are, and I'm never going to say that everything is conditioning, right? But the truth is that's why we have to look at them to see if it is conditioning or is it truly what we're doing, right? And the fact is, a lot of the time we don't notice them because it's pattern, right? And patterns are safe. They kept us safe at some point, right? Saying yes to keep peace, being responsible to get approval. I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for me. That could be true. Staying quiet to avoid conflict, right? And those patterns worked for us. They kept us safe. They kept us right. They work until they don't, kind of thing. And even then, once you've realized it, sometimes they stick around because familiarity feels safer than freedom sometimes. I want to repeat that. Familiarity feels safer than freedom sometimes, especially in households or in lives where you grew up with uh, an instability in the house, right? So anything, you know how to react to certain things. So that familiarity breeds free, safe. It doesn't allow you to be free, but it does feel very comfortable, right? Here's the thing. What I want us to talk about is that we'll slow down for a second, right? So we've covered what it is, what it feels like, but the truth is conditioning isn't just in your head. Your body, yeah, it lives there too, right? You know, It's in your nervous system. It's if you've ever made a decision, you have that tight feeling in your chest, especially if you're going against what people think is right. For instance, I quit my job, sold everything I owned, and then went to Europe for a year after 40. Like I was 40, right? That was against everything. Everybody thought it was crazy. They thought it was crazy. Some people thought it was brave, but also it was something that was very against what I had been told to do. So every time I made a step to plan, whether that was buying tickets or booking the hotel or actually getting on the plane, there was a tight feeling in my chest, right? It was nerves, yes, of course, but it was also excitement. So, and I think this is where using tools to help you kind of guide yourself through conditioning is helpful. So I use astrology and tarot, right? Because I don't use it as prediction, I use it as reflection, right? Your chart doesn't and or cards don't tell you who to be. It shows you certain patterns and where those patterns come from, right? And where you might be kind of running an autopilot. And I want to talk about those tools because I use astrology in a very different way. I use three different astrology methods. I call it my three P's method. I use Western, I use Vedic, and I use Draconic. And the way you can look for conditioning in those is that Western astrology tends to be your default settings, right? It's your habits, your instincts, the ways you learn to move through the world. So, for instance, I'm a Capricorn, right? So, if you have Capricorn energy, you might have learned really early that being useful or responsible allowed you to stay safe, right? Whereas if you're a Gemini, you probably thought staying mentally busy, you learn mentally busy is the way to be, right? So, you keep things light, you keep moving, you get distracted, and none of that is wrong. It's just learned, right? Then when you step into Vedic, right, that becomes a little bit deeper. That becomes another layer. It's you're taking a look at karma, but not in a bad way, not like the karma's a bitch kind of thing, right? That's not where you're at. You're really looking at it in a very practical way. So things like family expectations, cultural stories, the stuff you inherited without realizing you inherited it. Because here's the truth: we all have inherited things from generational trauma. That's like a buzzword, right? We've all inherited things from our parents, who inherited things from their parents, who inherited things, right? And you're inadvertently may still be living that, right? Uh, Here's the thing: this is where like you're like, oh my god, why do I keep doing this? Right? I know better. It doesn't feel right. And yet you still do it. And that's because even though you can spot it, it doesn't always undo the conditioning, right? Work has to be done to get that. Sometimes the truth is, and it's this way in everything, guys. You can't fix something if you don't know where it started from, right? And so that's kind of what this is. You have to see where it came from before you can make the adjustments, right? And that leads me to the third one, which is draconic. And this is where this one's a little quieter, right? Because it's not about who you became, it's about who you were before you had to adapt so much. So oftentimes I explain it like you're deconditioning to get to that, right? um, People often feel a sense like when you get there, you feel a sense of like recognition when you see it, right? You remembering yourself, and not the polished version that's walked through the world that has trauma that has had to like learn how to like navigate and survive. The and not the acceptable version that everybody thinks you should be. It's the real one, right? I also use tarot, like I said, and this is another great tool when it comes to conditioning to kind of gain insight into the everyday life, right? It's not really going to tell you about what's going to happen, although, sometimes you can kind of a little bit. It shows what's happening on the inside of you. A card may point to where like you're choosing things out of fear, or where maybe you feel something feels very familiar, so it's in alignment with you, right? And if you couple that with shadow work, which is basically you just sitting down and looking at the parts of yourself that you try to avoid all the time, the parts that you learned that or that learned it wasn't safe to want more, right? Or speak up or choose differently. When these parts get seen instead of shamed, something shifts. And this is how conditioning starts to break, because you have to acknowledge these things and make conscious efforts to move towards them, you know? And then you'll start seeing the everyday examples of where this conditioning comes in. I'll tell you a story. I was um, and it's funny because it happened when I was in my 30s, right? I started having to have Starbucks every day. Um, it was like the thing, right? Um, Not because I liked coffee. I actually hate the taste of coffee, but because people were telling me, "Oh, you should like it. You're an adult. Oh, you are a manager. You should like this. Oh, you should do this. You should do this." And I was like, "Oh, well, I guess well if everybody else is doing it, I should do it too, right?" I need to say I don't drink coffee anymore. If you've ever stayed quiet in a conversation, you've had lots to say, but you've stayed because you thought it's much more good to be agreeable than to be honest, right? And none of these ideas make you weak. It actually just makes you human, really, truthfully. But in order for things to change, you have to pause. It's the acknowledgement, right? Pause and pause just long enough to ask yourself, is this actually my choice or is it just familiar, right? In the end, guys, what I want you guys always, sorry, I'm trying really hard. I want you all, y'all, to really think about is that I don't think you need to fix yourself, right? You don't need to burn your life down and start over. You need to start by noticing. You need to start with curiosity, right? Notice where your body tightens. Notice where you feel relief, right? Notice what feels heavy. Astrology, tarot, and shadow work aren't here to control your life. They're actually here to help you see it more clearly. And the thing for me, and I think it's something very poignant that I think it's awareness creates space, okay, and space gives you options and growth. That's what I want to talk about today, right? Your daily choices build your life in very quiet ways. Questioning your conditioning doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you're paying attention. And so if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to hit the follow button, subscribe, keep exploring this work with me. That's what we're going to do. Once again, I'm Kim, and until next time, guys, keep noticing, keep questioning, keep choosing yourself. You got this. All right. Oh, wow. I just channeled that from one of my favorite tarot readers. But she's right. We've got this. Anyways, have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.